I have always been very focused on the importance of sustainability in my business. The packaging is a huge piece to the puzzle when it comes to a wine actually produced and sold in the most sustainable way possible. Nobody was really talking about the packaging of the wine and specifically the glass bottle and the negative impact that it had on the environment.
Most people think these days if you don't have a glass, like bottle glass, you're gonna lose quality. Can you make good wines and still using bag-in-box?
The end consumer that's looking to enjoy a wine for every day, they shouldn't in any way tie the idea of a packaging type to what they can expect from the quality of the package. Why is it really, from a rational standpoint, why are we attaching this glass bottle to, well, it automatically means it's quality?
Hello, Melissa. How are you?
I'm
Thank you
well, thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much for accepting that invitation for being part of the Vineyard Visionaries, where I told you like in previous on email that the podcast we try to bring all the voices of the visionaries in the industry, like the people who actually try to innovate, to try to bring something new, and we actually love what we are doing. You bring some new ideas about packagings, but we wanted to know more about you, like your background. I like the story of the wine queen because it's connected with your son. I would like to actually share that story as well with everyone because I think that's amazing. But yeah, tell me a little bit about you. What are we doing in the industry? What's your idea for bringing the wine pride for the future?
Okay, so I am the CEO and founder of both Communal Brands and Wine Queen. And in both capacities, essentially, I'm producing, importing, and distributing wine. And I have been doing this since 2009. I have always been very focused on the importance of sustainability in my business, in the producers that I work with, and the wines that are being produced. And I think for me, it's always been important to really dig in and understand, okay, so why is this wine, truly sustainable, so that I could really extrapolate out, foundationally, what is making this wine something that falls, into the ethos of my company. And through that digging, I did come to the realization that the packaging is a huge piece to the puzzle when it comes to a wine actually being produced and sold in the most sustainable way possible. And so this was in probably about 2014, 2015 that I started to understand the impact of the packaging. And it was really interesting because at that time, just, in this context of innovation, nobody was really talking about the packaging of the wine and specifically the glass bottle and, the negative impact that it had on the environment. So with that information and with that knowledge, and honestly going quite deep into understanding the impact of the single-use glass bottle, I was committed to really looking at solutions and alternatives to the single-use glass bottle to always reduce environmental impact. It was from that I learned that actually it's the bag-in-box, short of reusing that glass, and not just, putting it in a bin, short of that, which is obviously the best if you are looking at packaging that's minimizing waste completely, that's always the best solution. But short of that, bag-in-box is actually the packaging type with the lowest carbon footprint and generating the least amount of waste. And so, I set out to produce and import and distribute and market and educate, around this format.
And that's where you create the wine queen. That's pretty much your
Oh,
company. That's
yes,
what you
and
bring the women.
so okay, yeah, so it's always a little circuitous. So Wine Queen, is a consulting, business that I have that, actually aligns very well with what I'm doing with communal, but, Wine Queen I started, when I became a master of wine, and the Wine Queen came out of the idea that, education, advocacy, and just information around, alternatives to single-use glass and the sustainability aspect of the packaging and really just holistically in the industry, that this was something that I wanted to really focus on. And so, yes, that's what Wine Queen does. Wine Queen focuses exclusively on sustainability solutions for the industry with a focus on the packaging. And why is it called Wine Queen? Because people ask me this. I am in no way, shape, or form royal in any capacity, so it has nothing to do with that. When I was studying to become a master of wine, my kids would always ask me like, "Oh, mommy, like, what are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm studying and that." And it was actually my daughter that was like, "Oh, like, so you're trying to become a wine queen?" And I was like, "I guess yes, yes, that's what I'm doing." So the name basically stuck. And yeah, when I actually became a master of wine, I formed the.
I love it. I love it because it's such a very difficult exam. It's just very little mass of wines around the world, and then that's pretty much the queen of the industry, I guess. Tell me a little bit like I think that's when you people stop it to actually use sustainable packages and the bagging box. It's because I think the first things that come in the head is about the quality, because I think most people think these days if you don't have a glass like bottle glass, you're gonna lose quality. And I'm being interested to talk to you about that because I think equality is such a word we talk in the industry. It's all about quality. Is a we marketing pretty much in the normal markets. It's all about quality. It's so my quality, my this, my scores. It's so major quality in the industry. And then because they care so much in the industry in general about that how people perceive quality, the consumption, like the consumer perceive quality. I think they stop to innovate. What is actually the wine and the packaging? Like, what is the reflection? Can you make good wines and still using bag in box?
Absolutely. And actually, I mean, you've touched on so many things that are important, and I'll try to pull out what I think would be most relevant here. Absolutely. When you're speaking about the vessel or the packaging that you choose for a wine, you do have to take into consideration what is the intention for this wine. If it is a wine that is intended for long-term aging, which those of us in the industry recognize that, in the big picture, this is probably, well, it isn't probably, it is a relatively small percentage of the wine produced and consumed overall. But if it is intended for long-term aging, you absolutely, and when I say long term, I mean years, right? Certainly more than 12 months, but we're usually talking about much more than that. And we're talking about evolution in the bottle and development in the bottle as a positive attribute. And for these types of wines, you really do want what I'll refer to as an inert vessel like glass. And you want a closure that's going to really reduce the amount of oxygen ingress so that oxidation is slow and over time. But as I pointed out, this is really a specific category of wines that is not really your everyday wines, because we do know statistically that the majority of wines in the market are consumed within the night of purchase. So this is not what I just referred to as really the exception rather than the rule when it comes to what's sold, in a mass way. Wine that's intended to be consumed within the night of purchase, or certainly within a year of being bottled. Here we have a bit more latitude in terms of packaging format. And why? Because essentially, you are not looking for long, slow development or aging in that format. You are looking for it to be secure. You are looking for it to not impart anything negative, that could in any way impact the flavor or character or chemistry of the wine. And so for that, you do actually have a lot more options when it comes to packaging types. We could go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, the styles of wines that you put in different packaging types and how those wines need to be managed from a quality control perspective will differ depending on whether you're putting it in aluminum or the plastic for the bag-in-box or a PET bottle. That's getting a little bit more technical, but for the end consumer that's looking to enjoy a wine for every day, they shouldn't in any way tie the idea of a packaging type to what they can expect from the quality of the package at all. That being said, I fully recognize that in most consumers' eyes, the 750 milliliter glass bottle is the gold standard and that is a nod to quality. What I find interesting about that, and particularly interesting about the fact that, a bag-in-box is the other end of the spectrum. It actually connotes a negative stigma of low quality. I'm really puzzled because when you really look at wine in bottle, right, which is pretty much pervasive in most wine stores, you are going to see wines in bottle that are $5 and are probably of quite modest quality. And then you're also going to see bottles of, the sky's the limit. So why is it really, from a rational standpoint, why are we attaching this glass bottle to, well, it automatically means it's quality? Because it is irrational, but that's the tradition and the paradigm that we're in right now. I suspect that a lot of alternatives having stigmas, some of it, especially in the case of bag-in-box, is rooted in the fact that, well, bag-in-box wine wasn't necessarily of good quality. So it did get pigeonholed. This can happen, right? And I think that's one factor. Another factor to consider is that I think when the I guess average consumer, not a consumer with a high level of education, which is most consumers, when they're going into a wine shop, they may not necessarily have confidence to know, oh, well, these are attributes that connote quality, because you were referencing quality earlier. These are objective pieces of information that are going to point to quality, or things that I know that I would like. Many consumers don't have those tools in their toolkit, and so it's a bottle, it has a cute label, it might be a variety that they're comfortable with, whether it be Chardonnay or Pinot Grigio or Prosecco, because these things have been marketed and are in styles that are relatively friendly. They're relying on this, and it just happens to be in a glass bottle, and there isn't that confidence to say, oh, something that's in a can or a box or whatever, like there's an insecurity, I think, that as an industry we're not necessarily pushing to overcome.
And I guess there is a very big talk about sustainable, like the new generation really wanted to look after the, like we choosing eat better, we choosing doing things better, we see more, even me, like we changing behaviors as well. We don't need to be a new generation, we change behaviors as well. Like we do try to be more aware about the sustainable, the world. We wanted to know more, and then that's just not just the Gen Z, like millennials, like my generation as well. I think it just we have more information today. It's much easier to get information. Go on Google, internet, it's becoming crazy. Like you go on social media, we have information everywhere. We have these millions of videos of people telling you lots of stories you didn't know 10 years, 20 years ago. The information decades ago, it was hard. We need to read books, and sometimes you don't even know that books exist. today with the internet. It's pretty easy. You go into Google, you read anything you want, you learn anything you want, you guide yourself with anything you want. And then because you have so much more information, we're much more aware what we can do. We much more power. We have much more power, like what we can do. And then such a powerful, like it's a very great. I think it's great that we have more information. We can progress. But I think it seems like the whole industry is moving ahead with that. But the wine industry, because they have so these traditionals and they wanted to be that traditional. Even the bag in box is not something completely new. It's not something new either. Have been in the market for ages and ages and ages. And and I think people just realize it's not needed. It's not great for the environment. We can see that on the internet very easily. People know that. And then I think that's probably one of the things to stop us to buy more wines, because if we know someone is going to be more friendly with the more sustainable, more friendly, because we have more information, you don't need to be cautious. It's just unconsciously you actually buy that. It's just because we're doing things better for the world. And I think the wine industry missing the opportunity, and they don't even see, because they don't stop and ask themselves why they stop to drink wine, why they looking for sustainable, why, and then stop us to innovate. But you're right, we have absolutely so many wines for $5 to $10. You don't necessarily need to be in the bottle, but even they have a quality now in the back box. So I was in Dame FZ yesterday. He's Dame FZ in Australia, so it's about 240 stores in the whole Australia. So they have a producer that's called Ricatera. He was like a bag in box for $50. I think it's like cool, well done. I haven't tried yet, but I think people, have a few. It's very few, not many, but they started to open their eyes for the bagging box. But I think it's very positive.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting there, but here's the thing: because of the negative stigma associated with the packaging type, and because it's typically associated with wine that's less expensive and lower quality, when you do produce a wine that's more expensive and higher quality, then people are like, oh, why is it so expensive? And there's a skepticism there. And there's you have to produce it and make it available in order to change the stigma. But then you also have to go through the steps of educating that not all box wines are created equal, just like not all bottles are created equal. There's a range of quality. And again, it comes down to the educational piece of at least facilitating what an end consumer could and should be looking for when they're assessing the quality of a wine. And it goes well beyond just the type of package that it's in and the label, right? And that's where I think it is our job as an industry to be a bit more forthcoming and to make things a little more accessible. I think there are a number of charms associated with the traditional aspects of our industry, and some of them are, I mean, tradition is you can't dispute if a certain variety is farmed in a particular way, and and there's generations in history. We're not looking to upturn that necessarily. If something is working well, and it has for a very long time, that's, I think, some of the foundational basis for tradition, right? But if something isn't continuing to work, and I think that the industry is seeing this, it might be producing a lot of really great wine, but getting that really great wine sold at the same level that it was selling before is definitely something that we're coming up against right now in terms of a challenge. And I think that is a sign that perhaps traditional ways that we've marketed and sold wine might need to change. And that's where I feel like there's a window of opportunity for some of these alternatives, because to your point earlier, it is younger generations that are going to be the future of our industry. They are the future consumer. And in my experience, also to your point, we're generalizing, but for the most part, I think it's fair to say that they are much more interested in products, consumer goods that align with their values
Yes.
across the board, with sustainability being one of them. And that, if you're weighing, you know, it aligns with my values against, well, it's tradition to always have a heavy bottle with, a gold capsule that you don't really need. And, whatever it is that's, the tradition, but it doesn't really align with their values. Ultimately, I think, packaging types, ways of communicating about the wine, the accessibility of what's in that package, I mean, I think that will ultimately win that future consumer over. So it is actually an interesting time. I've sort of resided myself to the fact that with a lot of what I'm trying to do, I might not convince people that have been doing something a certain way for decades and are really not interested in changing. I'm much better off attracting in those consumers that are interested in what I'm doing, and let's build the future that way.
Yeah, and I agree. Like Socrates says, it's don't fight for the old, build the new. And that's actually exactly what we should do. Is just build the new, like build whatever the people want for the future. And now we can't really spend your time in trying to fighting and fighting and fighting and anything, to be honest. Like we I see like if every single topic we talk it too much, it is like look a fight. Someone's coming, oh, don't drink alcohol, and you try to don't drink alcohol. It just became like this, oh my god. And then we don't go anywhere because you go in cycles, because you fight. It's like a politician fight. You talk about this politician, but this politician, and at the end of the day, people, it's way more attention you give it to these things, more people get lost. They don't know why we try to justify that so much, and I think it's some of these fightings is not taking us anywhere anyway. I think I am with you. I think it's much better to spending time try to bring the new solutions than just fighting for the problems. I think that's not going to help us at all. But building the news is actually the way we all should go and innovate the industry and then try to bring the new solutions for this new market. The market the change behavior, we all know that the social media, the internet give much more information. So we needed to be aware of those things and then make the future. I think that's just what it's gonna be. But there is something there on the bagging box. I saw in your posts is and read about the blog, and I felt very interested because probably is a question for lots of people. It's going against of bagging box. Is it actually about the plastic? Because that's a little plastic they have that, and then plastic is not is not sustainable. um and then I love your explanation, but so someone don't read your article and I could listen from you, your explanation between what's the difference between glass and actually that the little plastic we use it for the bagging box impacted, like they actually affected the actual environment. So how both, if you put in that to and evaluate how they impacting the environment, so who is impacting less?
Yes. So, okay. So you absolutely touched on something that comes up all the time, which is the plastic. And whew, this is a big topic, but essentially, I guess the best place to start would be that when most people are evaluating the environmental responsibility or environmental credentials of a particular packaging type, they're more often than not thinking about its recyclability for whatever reason. And kudos to that recycling symbol, which it's a very complicated and actually controversial issue. But thanks to the recycling symbol and the marketing that's been associated with it, when something has recyclability, a packaging type, most people think, cool, it's good for the environment. Okay. Now, this is absolutely only one piece to the puzzle. And recyclability does not equate to it, all of the elements that contribute to the environmental credentials of a particular packaging type. So that's number one. Number two is just because something isn't recyclable doesn't negate its environmental credentials. So that's where you have to actually like work a little bit harder. And I'm not going to lie, how to behave and manage waste in a responsible way is unfortunately way more complicated than it needs to be, and it's far more complicated in the U.S., which is, given the amount of waste that we generate, even more disturbing. But if we could just break down with a little bit of education, if you're comparing a glass bottle with the bag and box as a packaging type, the bag and box, first of all, is the equivalent, a 3-liter bag and box, which is what I work with. It's the equivalent of 4 bottles of wine. So that means that like square little box and the small bag that's inside is the same, is 1 unit, or, it's 1 unit of package. It's 75% cardboard, and then the other roughly 25% is the liner and the tap, versus 4 bottles, labels, capsules, and the closure. So already you're talking about less waste. Then we look at the weight. The weight of that 3-liter cardboard bag and box is a fraction of the weight of the 4 glass bottles of wine. And I don't want to get into weights because the weights of glass bottles vary so much, but even the lightest weight bottle at about 350 to 400 grams, you're still winning by a mile. So there's that. So that's waste, and then also weight in transport and the emissions that that entails is another factor to be considering. And then last but not least, the actual carbon emissions from the packaging elements itself. When you're looking at the bag and box being 75% cardboard and this plastic liner, and you're looking at the 4 glass bottles, the emissions of the glass bottles, it varies, but it's roughly 8 to 10 times more than that single unit of package for the bag and box. And people will say to me, well, why? And it essentially comes down to the production of those bottles, the amount of energy, and it's fossil fuel based energy that's required to produce those glass bottles, to heat the furnaces to about a couple of thousands of degrees Celsius, and they're running all the time, all day. When you look at the energy intensivity and the inputs to produce that glass bottle, again, your carbon footprint is going to be off the charts relative to the bag and box. So both from a packaging waste perspective and from a carbon emissions standpoint, the bag and box is, no matter how you slice it, has much better environmental credentials. Now, the plastic bag isn't great. And in the US specifically, we do not recycle flexible plastics. So at the moment, it is not recyclable. However, the plastic bags winding up in the ocean, which, I mean, I am not a plastic advocate and I am not an advocate of plastic bags winding up in the ocean, but that problem is a waste management problem and a consequence of what you do with that plastic bag, and how our waste is managed here, and how it ends up in the ocean. That's a completely different and separate issue than what we were just talking about. So it's not great that the plastic bags wind up in the ocean. I'm not saying that they are, but we could be doing better to avoid that from happening in the first place if our waste management was more under wraps. And yeah, it's funny because I'm big also in the reuse community, and I'm a big advocate for trying to create circular economies for just about everything, but obviously focusing a lot on the glass bottle for wine. And I would, in a heartbeat, collect the bags, the plastic liners for my bag and box, because they can be recycled actually privately, not in, mainstream public, but privately they could be. Like if we had an infrastructure for collecting glass, we could also create an infrastructure for collecting the bags. And those bags could be upcycled and, converted into, outdoor decking and things. I mean, there are absolutely outlets for the bags, but unfortunately we're not at a place right now where we live in a very disposable economy. People are very comfortable just putting things in a bin. If it's a recycling bin, they can feel a little bit better about themselves, even though in most instances what's going in there isn't being recycled. And we're not yet ready to do to take that extra step to actually, have reuse or circular economy operate at scale. So, I mean, there is hope because there are other options out there. We're just not quite there where consumers are ready to adopt behaviors that, would be less convenient, I guess, than just throwing something away. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I like you put it like both, like some of the you give like some of the negative things as well for the plastic. So just giving like a little bit more awareness as well. Plastic is not great, but we compare like the two things, how impacted the world, it's becoming better, but it's not the final solution. For your research and for you having involved today, something else is maybe more, maybe it's not here now, but maybe something people are working on for nearly future for a better. It's not plastic, it's not glass, it's something else. It's gonna be healthy, like in the environment.
I mean, okay, so right now, I mean, well, to your point, no packaging waste is a problem, right? So the extent to which we can reduce waste and reuse, this is the answer, honestly. I mean, the answer, and in my experience, if you start, looking around at what you're throwing away and you're really conscious, a lot of that could be reduced and has the potential to be reused if we were in those habits. And then it comes down to, producers of this packaging being as responsible as they possibly can and not just, producing goods in packages that have unnecessary waste. To your point about, is there a better solution? There is a lot of innovation out there. And right now, I know that, everybody would love for that plastic liner with the wine in it to be a, compostable or biodegradable type of plastic. Unfortunately, you're always dealing with trade-offs. If it were compostable or biodegradable, which even those things aren't great, that's like a whole other rabbit hole to go down. They are better, but they're still not great because they take a very long time to break down. But something like that is not really possible with wine, because when you have the compostability aspect, then you're also messing with the oxygen permeability, right? So it would be more oxygen permeable. It would be a higher oxygen transfer weight, which is exactly what we're looking to avoid in bag and box, because the oxygen is really the enemy for the wine. So we really want to keep that at bay. So right now there isn't really any instant solution, but I would say, in this space, I encounter really cool things all the time. I mean, one of the things that I'm looking to do is with wines in my portfolio that for whatever reason, certainly in the short to medium term have to remain in glass. I'm looking at glass that's already been used, which I like to call vintage glass. And there are markets for these things, particularly in Europe, and in particular in France, the market's pretty robust. And so it's just a matter of coordinating with producers and, pushing for that, because even just reusing a glass, 1 or 2 or 3 vintages can make a huge impact, because so much of the environmental impact is in the production of the glass anew. So I'm looking to do things like that, and that's working with, systems and goods that exist already. So there isn't really any kind of bright idea that has to happen. You just have to get organized. And there are also, I guess, other innovations. There's the paper bottle that I'm looking very closely at, which is similar to a bag and box, obviously, but it's just in the shape of a bottle, which I think is is brilliant. Has a lot of potential for just coaxing consumers along. You know, if they have to have that shape to feel comfortable, well, they can. But you know, this packaging type also has all the environmental credentials of the bag and box, or at least close. You know, it is a single use format, so it's not a larger format, but it's still really quite good. And yeah, I mean, I'm always looking at you know, how to improve and you know, what's coming down the line and experimenting.
Something we did as well at the Murphy last year when we worked at the Murphys, we actually get up a space where we put all the corks, try to recycle the corks.
Great.
I think yeah, that's some things we could do, like our industry as a whole. You know, if we putting it all together to try to recycle things, you know, like glasses, back the plastics, you know, like the corks, whatever. I think it's going to be much more friendly to the environment. So I think we just see missing the point for many, many years as well. It's something we actually could add in and the things that we're already doing. Because like you said, not all the bottles is going to be beneficial to bring back in box. If you wanted to age in your wine, you probably it's better to use the glass. And then,
Exactly.
you know, but something we could do for those is actually sell is still when the need to sell on these on the bottles, we actually could be able to, you know, bring the people together, the whole industry, try to do something we can actually making those things recycle. I think it's going to be beneficial as for the industry as a whole, for what you said. But I wanted to ask you something because I love like the post. I really read all your posts before this interview because I found your blog very cool. If you guys never been reading the blogs, please leave your name there. So she writes it absolutely amazing about the topics he really matter in the industry. So going to Wine Queen and have like the put your email and to receive all the blogs is amazing. Other thing as well, the blog, the one you did, and I think they did it very well in the LinkedIn as well. It was that we have always done this way. I want to finish this podcast by three advices you wanted to give to everyone who's watching this episode. How to overcome this phrase, you know, these things we have in your head, like we always have done this way. And then I wanted to see like how we can change the look to see things different, how we can create new perspectives. And then your mindset, you know, and just to see things a little bit different what most people see today. What's your three advices for those people say we always have it done this way, how we can create different perspectives for them to help them to see different opportunities for themselves?
Okay, I'll try to think of three. So I would say, first of all, you know, the wine industry is probably one of the more unique industries in the sense that we really do have a very established and set and traditional way of doing just about everything. So my first piece of advice would be to just in any you know, retail environment, reflect on, you know, the brands that you're looking at, the goods that you're looking at, and say to yourself, wow, like, has it always, like, can you imagine if, oh, I don't know, I mean, even if you look in a milk aisle in a grocery store, like if things hadn't changed for, you know, generations, what that aisle would look like it would look very, very, like, first of all, boring, but very, very different, right? All the different styles of milk from all kinds of different, you know, anyway, it's very interesting how homogenous and how you know, the same wine has been. And I think, you know, just looking at any other consumer good and thinking, wow, what would that look like if it hadn't changed at all? It would almost like kind of make you be like, woo, what? Weird. So that's one thing that I think is just a little bit of a prompt. Another thing is I always find when you do bring a refreshing perspective to the market and you can illustrate and demonstrate that you've really thought about it and that it's, you know, rooted in experience and education and knowledge, and, you know, the quality of the wine is not to be disputed at all, because, you know, obviously that is paramount at the end of the day. If you do show up with something that is of the utmost quality and has a fresh, innovative twist to it, and you can speak about it with authority. I do find that a lot of my industry peers have been interested and engaged, and I think that we should be encouraged to do that as opposed to only feeling comfortable with the status quo, because that will yield the status quo. And as we can see right now, I'm not sure that that's a way to really grow and further our industry in a bright and exciting way. So that would be my second thing. And my third thing, I guess, would be, I guess, related to the second thing, just like don't be afraid. I would say, if we were to look across, industries, and the scope can be quite broad. Initiating any kind of change can be scary, but once we have the courage to do it and we take the steps to apply new thinking, new approaches, it's not always going to work, but that's how we learn, and we continue to put one foot in front of the other. And if we just stay afraid, then there's stagnation, and that's not exciting at all. That we know what that will yield. And so we may as well just go for it.
I guess it's just be brave, don't be stagnant in the industry, and have a look around.
Have a look around. I think comparisons with other industries can be so insightful. I'm a big one for analogies. And when we start to think in that context, it can really open the aperture. So yeah.
I guess you nailed with your answer. It's exactly what I thought. Like, don't be afraid, be brave, and then mainly that, like, look around, like, see what the industry is doing. Like, it's not just you. It's not the problem. It's just in your industry. It's everyone needed to innovate it. Everyone bringing new things in the market. You see the supermarket with more things than we had it like 5, 6, 7 years ago. We have much more products is available, much more flavors available, more healthy things available than never before. If you're just looking around us, we see everything is changing. So I like that. Look around. It's probably when making us reflect it, like what the world we are living at the moment. And you're absolutely amazing, Melissa. I think all of us probably you're gonna enjoy so much in your podcast and your message. I'm so glad to be able to meet you actually, not in person, but online, but in this more intimate conversation. And yeah, so I'm glad you're here to bring that awareness about the new ideas, new packages needed, and I'm so glad because I thought like all wine master wines is going to be very traditional. Don't want anything different. And when I felt you talk about bag and box, it's like, oh my god, this is awesome. Let's have a shot. And this is actually something it was very surprised me because I thought Master One is gonna be all very traditional, but I found so many Master One is so open-minded, so critical thinking, so different. It's completely different what the perception most people think. It's a very cool to be able to just be involved in this innovation thing because I think you guys doing the most of innovation at the moment, and then it's completely the thing I did not expect it because the whole things what people think about it. I never done the massive one, but I thought it was going to be very non-critical thinking. It's like more narrow and very structured. But I'm very surprised of like like how you guys actually thinking. You pretty much like much more engaging in future and let's go, let's do it, more action. So yeah, it's very surprised me, and I think probably going to surprise lots of people as well. I don't know about what you think, but that's my feeling.
Absolutely. I mean, well, I think like anything, like we can make, there's like, more bag and box masters of wine and more traditional bottle masters of wine. There's a mix for sure. For sure.
But thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks so much for your knowledge to share with us.
Of course. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for having me.